Thanks everyone for being here. We're really excited to share some insights with you all around how teams can start to get the benefits of design systems just by changing how they think about contribution and sharing within their organization. I'm your host today, Andrew Rohman. I lead customer success at Knapsack. I've spent really my whole career in and around digital production. And I'm going to share some insights and best practices for system-based digital production from the time we spent speaking with practitioners. I'll be joined then with Tommy Kuntze from Rhumbix, who can share a firsthand account of his journey getting a system practice up and running and how the concepts we'll talk about today played into his team's success so far. And then Knapsack's head of product, Susie Dirks, will join us to share an exciting update on the Knapsack platform and how we help teams, help enable teams to address some of the really age-old challenges that I think we've all dealt with in digital production. So I've spent the majority of my professional time over the last 3 or 4 years really working with system teams and product teams of all shapes and sizes. All were striving for this great, simple, lofty ideal of what design systems can offer. And when I look at teams that have been successful, there's really one thing that stands out, which is that design systems done right, at least, are really about behaviors more than they are about the assets. A system without the right behavior around it just doesn't get anyone very far. Even the best Lego pieces in the world don't help you build a better product just by themselves. So the same is actually true from another angle, which is that behaviors of system-based production can deliver value even without the best assets. Right? We can start to realize some of the benefit without having our system fully baked or perfected. Specifically, teams that work in ways that enable code to be reused where appropriate start to realize the benefits of having a design system, or the benefits that we sold to executives that we get out of the system, regardless of whether or not they really have that proper design system established. The value doesn't actually come from the system. All of the value here comes from the behaviors that led to reusing code. What are those behaviors, you might ask? We like to start really simply with things that any team can start to emphasize, regardless of where they are in their system journey or their evolution as a product team. And those are asking things like, how might we enable all teams to browse reusable elements? By that, I just mean things that have already been designed and developed, and see what we already have to work with, right? So that we can reduce repeat solutions. And then secondly, how might we enable all teams to share and contribute what they're designing and what they're building for others to see, use, and be inspired by? That's it. The great benefit of focusing on those behaviors is that no one team has to be responsible for enabling all the others. As you build up a library of existing design and code, or if you already have a design system, the role of managing it becomes about maintaining those foundational elements and some of the platforms that enable this way of working that we're talking about. But then it's focusing on enabling teams that use it and curating those teams' contributions, right? Not on being a bottleneck to the organization and the team that needs to make everything. Right? You get to work in this way directly with the users of your product to make the product better, which just as someone who's been on the fringes of product teams, we should all be so lucky to have that type of direct access to a really engaged user base. And when you're in that role, you'll see that working this way actually helps us to avoid some of the classic pitfalls of system-based production, because we shift this operation away from one-way delivery, this whole take it or leave it, hope it works kind of, to a real two-way conversation that's helping the team help the other team, right? It's no longer the system team telling designers and engineers how to work or what to use to make products. It's no longer a dead end for teams that have needs for which the system doesn't solve, or when they can't find out how to make the system work for them. Right? Teams don't need to split and maintain their own special system or some subversion that gets disconnected, because they can actually help make the main system that you're providing better for their team and for all the teams that use it. And it turns out there are other smart people that think this is a good idea. Dan Mall, who's a real leader in this space and just a great thinker and communicator, recently posted a Twitter thread highlighting how important this very idea of communication and contribution is. Right? If all we provide is a one-way story about how teams could or should build product, we aren't sharing the good stuff, right? The nuggets of experience from teams that have built product in this organization or using this system. Enabling this contribution isn't a nice to have, right? It's the entire point of trying to get these benefits and trying to work this way. And what does it all mean for your organization? Well, many of you have probably seen a version of this graph that depicts, system investment. Right? You have to spend some time up front and go below the line, but then it's going to pay off down the road. Well, the reality that we see is many teams don't make it back above the line. Right? They never break even, and then they start over. They make a new system. Right? When we focus on behavior, though, and enabling teams already doing great design and development work to contribute, to share, to reuse out of the gate, we spend a lot less time below the line, and we get to value faster, or just we get to value at all, even. So with that, I'm really excited to welcome to this virtual stage Tommy Kuntze from Rhumbix. Tommy is someone that I know I've learned a lot from when it comes to seeing how he's approached these challenges in the real world. Tommy, why don't you share just a little bit about your role and your experience with systems so far?
Totally, yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Hey, y'all. I'm Tommy Kuntze, head of research and design at Rhumbix. Some quick context about Rhumbix. We're known as the field data platform in the construction industry. Basically, we're moving folks from using paper and Excel spreadsheets into the digital world to get workers paid accurately and on time. Really, we aim to make sense of all the data that these construction companies create. Before Rhumbix, I was not in construction. Mostly, I come from the world of ad tech. My first experience with design systems was at Twitter in 2014. A group of us took on a Hack Week project and built out a component library called #Feather. Twitter's ad campaign forms took forever to build, and we wanted to prove out the value of reusable components. So I think it was like 8 of us built out key components and then rebuilt all of our campaign forms to show how efficient reusable components would make us. And we won. We got to pitch to Costello to make it an official project, and from there it lived on. Now at Rhumbix, we're on our second go at a design system.
So tell me a little bit more about that. The second go. It's something I've heard a lot about. How'd the first go?
Yeah, totally. Well, from a UI perspective, Rhumbix is all digital forms in like tabular data. So a design system is an obvious choice for us. We've got a standard set of reusable form components that we use to build all sorts of forms, things like safety forms or attendance forms, daily labor summary forms, very just basic components. So our first attempt at a design system was early last year. I tried taking the same approach as my Hack Week team did at Twitter. We had an Airtable full of all the components we wanted to create, one person running point on getting things built and approved, and we planned to build things up from scratch using Storybook. And it failed. It was too big of a lift, and the work kept getting deprioritized. The development team was super busy, and there was just enough friction with Storybook that I couldn't make progress without a developer helping me. So finally, it was clear we needed to regroup. So I announced to the team that the design system efforts needed to pause, and I took the action item to learn a better way to do it and report back. So I took Dan Mall's online course, really awesome. Started attending design system meetups. I dropped in on a design system conference that y'all were hosting, and that's how I ran into you, Andrew. It was like almost a year ago, last December.
Yeah, that's it sounds like the second go is still pretty early. So I'm curious, how did some of the contribution sort of concepts that we're talking about, or just enabling the sort of more organic way of working, how has that played into the things that are going well with the second go, compared to that first attempt?
Yeah, well, a big thank you to helping us for getting things to go better the second time. I think you really helped us figure out how to get our team using best practices. So early in our conversations, I mentioned to you, hey, we're building a small inline progress bar visualization, and you commented that, hey, that's actually a great place to start building your system. So one developer wired up Knapsack, built a component, that progress visualization component, imported into our web app, and everything worked. And once that was successful and everything was hooked up, we started adding in design tokens next. So we had created a new color palette maybe 2 years prior, but adoption was super slow. It was such a huge effort to get everything updated all at once. And 2, it lived in a design document that no one ever looked at. So people were like, oh, I didn't know we had a new color palette. Now that our web and mobile app are connected to our design system, it's easier to change things in the code when we're in it. So I'd say about 25-ish% of our platform is now using the new color palette, and it just kind of every time we're in a code base, we just keep updating stuff. So now we also have a whole icon set in there. We've got notification banners, we've got drop downs, we have full-on error pages in our design system. So it's been gaining momentum month over month, and as people use it and contribute to it, it just gets easier. But as for getting buy-in on it and making it an official thing, the first start was really sort of trying to take this official approach. We're going to start from scratch. Everyone's going to work this way. But the second one, it really came from the development team, finding one or two teammates that also knew that this was the right way to build our product. That was really key. And then it became a bit of a skunkworks project for the most of the year. We decided that when we worked together, this is how we were going to work. So as other teammates would hear about it, they'd be curious to try out the code and contribute. And from there, it snowballed. Most recently, though, we did get a VP of Eng who joined our company, and he's a big believer in design systems. He's kind of seen what we were doing, and he made the official push for the team to prioritize it. So, really buy-in has been thanks to the start anywhere approach. Just put your existing components in there and get your production code to import it. And once you're hooked up, it's easy to contribute and have things snowball.
What did you see have happen once that sort of you think things ran and started being used? What happened at that point once it kind of really hit the real world of production as opposed to like just the elements in the system?
Yeah, well, getting things out in the wild, I think, is really what has, triggers that contribution. For example, shipping that original component, once we were able to see it in the wild and observe it in conditions we hadn't anticipated, it was so much easier to iterate on small things like border and background color to get things just right and contrast just right. And the original engineer that built that progress visualization was pulled onto something else. But another teammate new to design systems was able to pick it up and iterate on it with me. So that two-way conversation that you mentioned earlier is just so much better than just seeing something in a sandbox environment and releasing it and like that's what you get. So yeah, contribution also really allows for cross-team collaboration. For example, throughout this year, we've had 4 to 5 different engineers contributing to our design system. Each person left it better than they found it and improve the process. Everyone was able to add back and not just use.
I love that idea of almost, contribution as a practice and behavior, almost future-proofing the system a little bit because it doesn't get that stale, oh, doesn't work for me, I'll go do my own thing. It enables the teams to make it better. I love that idea. Awesome. So what's next for Rhumbix, your design system? What are you working on now?
Yeah, well, our design team has our development team has an OKR this quarter under the objective of improving velocity, reliability, and quality. And so the KR on that is for 8 engineers developing in the design system. So that's huge for us. That it's an official push, it's an official thing, and the goal is set high. Also, currently, I'm hiring a senior product designer to join my team. Owning the design system process from the design side will be a big part of that role. So, also we're hiring across a bunch of engineering roles. So if anyone listening is interested to learn more about either of those, I'd love to hear from you. You can find the job posting on our website or hit me up directly. But I'll also add that working at Rhumbix is incredibly fun and rewarding. Autonomy is a major value of ours. So you'll find that everyone is trusted and empowered to just get the work done however you get it done. And there's a ton of opportunity for ownership and growth at our 50-some person startup. Plus, my teammates are incredibly friendly and supportive. So it's a great place to take on new challenges.
I'll echo that. The whole Rhumbix crew has been awesome to work with. Well, awesome. Thank you, Tommy, for joining us. People, please check out those openings. We'll send some follow-up info about Rhumbix as well. Tommy's going to stick around, so as questions roll in, we'll have some time after Susie's section to go back and have some chat. And we'll be able to stick around a little longer than the half-hour mark as well. So keep the questions coming. Thanks again, Tommy, so much. I love hearing a design leader talk about how excited they are about engineering OKRs. That couldn't be a better example of what we're striving for. Yeah. Awesome. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Susie Dirks, the head of product at Knapsack, to share a little bit about what we're doing over here.
All right, sounds great. Hi, everybody. I am Susie here at Knapsack. And thank you, Andrew and Tommy, for going through some of the behaviors that we see are making our customers and ourselves more successful with our design systems. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what Knapsack as a design system platform can do to help with collaboration, to help with contribution, to help that flow go better, to help those behaviors that we're talking about. And I'm going to start with product vision, a little bit about that. And then I'll show you a demo, including some new things that we released just 1 week ago. So our team and you guys, I'm sure everybody out there has a lot of experience working with design systems. And as we've talked to different customers, different users, and through our own experience, we found that there are two big divides. So one of those is between the design system team and the product teams, where the design system team is working really, really hard to put together something that's valuable for everyone to use. And in the meantime, the product team is trying to release product and get things out the door. And maybe their use cases don't feel like quite a fit for what the design system has managed to put together. So this is something where that two-way conversation is really helpful, and getting everyone to contribute makes these things come together and everyone be aligned on what is most important for us to have in a design system and what's the best way to keep this design system moving forward. The other big divide that we see is between different types of design systems for different disciplines. So for designers, it tends toward design files themselves, for example, a Figma library, and documentation. For engineers, it tends toward a UI component library, which is actual code. Now, these end up being very different tools. So our product vision is to be a shared workspace that helps the design system, product team, contribution, collaboration, that two-way conversation, and for designers and engineers to be in the same design system together and to be able to contribute in the ways they want to contribute and to be able to benefit from that design system so that it works for everyone. In other words, we want to connect all the people by connecting all the things. So at Knapsack, we've always used Git. We have a Git repo underlying our design system platform. And it's really great because that's how our customers can take everything that's created in that design system and actually deploy it and use it in real application code. It's code, it's the source of truth. It's what ends up in the final production application. So we're really working with code. The problem with that is it makes it so it's not always easy for non-engineers to contribute. And if we want to support collaboration, we want to support contribution, we want to get everyone involved, we want everyone who's a non-engineer to be able to contribute to the system also. So what can we do? So this is where we're taking our product. We're bringing everyone together. And we did have a major release last week that's making the workflow even smoother for people who aren't engineers. So I'm going to step into a demo and I'm going to point out a few things that are new. And then I'm going to show a little bit more for folks that haven't seen our product before. All right, here's Knapsack. Welcome. All right, so for those of you who have seen our product before, you might notice something new across the top. We have a new top bar. And in this top bar, we have controls around what we call cloud authoring. So cloud authoring is what we're calling the ability to work with a Git workflow directly from the Knapsack UI. So this means that a designer no longer needs to log into Git and access Git or ask an engineer to merge something that they want to publish as part of the design system. They can actually do that directly from the Knapsack UI. So this is to really help people be able to create, document, and publish whenever they're ready to go. I'm going to talk more about this, but first I'm going to give a very brief intro of Knapsack, the product, for folks that have not seen it before. So the best place I think for me to start is actually around design tokens. This is something that Tommy has talked about and is a nice way to talk about our page structure and how people build their design systems on our platform. So this is a documentation page. Documentation page holds different content blocks. and different types of content blocks, including Markdown, for example, and including special kinds of content blocks, like one specific to design tokens. So in order to really show this to you, I'm going to actually change into edit mode. To do that, I'm going to use our new cloud authoring feature. All right, so I can do this a couple ways. It's through branches, what we call branches, which are different drafts that are being worked on. And I can create a new branch, or I can select an existing one. I'm going to create a new branch. All right, new branch created. Here we go. So what happens is it creates a URL specific to this branch. This is really powerful because we can share this URL with other people and they can start collaborating on the same exact draft that I'm working on. It's also helpful because I can see where I am. So if we're here and we want to add, for example, a content block, this is for folks that aren't familiar. We have different types of content blocks. We have Markdown, we have design tokens, which I'm going to go into, component embed. And these are different types of things. So Markdown is more around documentation and static content. Design tokens, component embed, those are dynamic content. Those tie directly to source code. So that means if you change the design token, it changes the source code. If you change the source code, it changes what we're showing to you in the UI. And that's something that Knapsack is providing for our customers, that we are handing that to you. Let me show you for design tokens what that means. So the design token content block is here. So here's one example of it. So it's a content block, in this case, that we filtered to color, the category color for design tokens. And maybe we've filtered a little bit more. And then we have different views, and Knapsack is providing these views. This isn't something that's documented, and it's not something that has to get updated. It's actually based on the hex values that are in a JSON file. And we're finding a way to display that so that we can automate a lot of your documentation. It's also pretty powerful because a designer can come in here and say, hey, it's time, as Tommy has done, it's time to update our brand colors, right? It's time to make the move. And so, you know what? You can go in here and you can say, you can add the new design tokens, or you can edit existing ones. And when you make this edit, what's happening is it's actually editing that JSON file. And then it's also being transformed by Knapsack into CSS, SAS, XML for Android, Swift for iOS, etc. All the things that developers will need from the design system package to actually use this in their application code. On the flip side, if somebody goes into the JSON and changes a hex value, you'll see that it's changed in the UI. So it's all dynamic. It's always up to date. You don't have to come in here and finagle the actual presentation documentation of it. Another thing that Tommy talked about was around finding that simple component that you're building anyway, right? Find that component and start there. Like, that's the best way. You start basic, because then everyone feels very comfortable contributing to the system. It's like, it's a bare bones system. They're like, hey, the button is awesome, but I also want to add this other thing. And it just creates a better space for people to feel like they can add value. In our area around buttons, we have different sub tabs, and these are also very helpful because we're bringing designers and engineers into the same page, and we're showing, for example, a Figma embed content block, which shows the intended design for the button, right alongside the actual implementation from React, from Angular, from web components. And this is coming from a template, a coded template that the Knapsack UI is displaying. This allows the designer to then go in and edit and make changes to this, including changing the props. So again, it's bringing everyone in to one place so that they can make changes, see what they look like, see how they fit together. And to wrap it back up with cloud authoring again, I've been demoing a few things. I might make a few changes, right? I might change the text of the button. But I'm doing it on my branch, right? So this is the Susie branch. You can name it something that's not personal, but this is the Susie branch. And I know that if I don't like that last change, I can undo. If I'm not feeling great about a lot of things that I've done since my last commit, I can discard my changes. Or I can decide I want to commit my changes and publish. And that's my way to get that documentation out there quickly and easily. So I feel free to come and explore, experiment. It's all on a branch. And then when I'm ready, it's really easy for me to actually push it out and make it live. All right, that's it for me. Back to you, Andrew.
Awesome. Thank you, Susie. I love seeing that stuff in action, seeing how we can bring folks together, not just in a shared workspace, but around some tried and tested solutions, right? Git is phenomenal at what it does for managing contributions and conflicts, and how do you bring these operations together? But that's just been so unavailable really to so many folks that aren't engineers. So seeing it all come together, seeing it in one place is just really exciting. And as we, just to sort of do a little recap and wrap things up before we answer a couple of questions, what did we learn today? So if we unify workspaces and workflows across teams and enable everyone to contribute, turns out we can get a lot of value, right? No matter where we are in our journey. And that's the best thing about all this. This isn't just about design systems and for teams that have hit a certain milestone, right? If we start to look at the different sort of stages that teams might be in when they think about systems, right? Even if you're not there yet, intake and planning, right? You've got to build an inventory, right? You've got to understand what is available for teams to work with. And there's no better way to do that than to invite everyone in who's already designing and building stuff, right? Invite them in to start contributing, right? You're not only going to create a shared inventory, but you're going to get around that challenge that we raised earlier of just the silos, right? We talked to so many teams that it's an us against them design system versus product, as Susie mentioned. And if they're part of the very initial part of gathering what's out there and appreciating design and code that already exists, you're going to avoid one of those silos. And you're also just going to realize that some things can be reused already, right? You can start getting reuse and shared innovations out of just letting people surface things, even from the get-go. Right? As you build, foundations and as you release more elements to your system, as Tommy said, getting feedback from people who've used it. Right? Did it really work in production as we thought? How do we improve it as we scale? Having those feedback and examples from teams that are using it in production. And then of course, as you start to scale, teams sharing their own solutions of where the system didn't work for them, or custom examples so that other folks can see it in a context that might be unique to them that wasn't in the basic example the system team made, right? Teams using your system can actually help share the burden of maintenance and adoption, and it doesn't even need to feel like too much work. So that's what we're really excited about, enabling for teams. I know we are at the top of the hour or top of the half hour. If you can stick around, some of us certainly will, and provide some answers. We'll also send out the question and answers that we have, and you can always reach out to us at hello@knapsack.cloud, and we'd love to engage with each and all of you. So we'll stick around here, but if anyone needs to leave, thank you so much for joining us. We'll go through some of the questions that we had here right now. Cool. So, Tommy, I'm curious for you. Chris asked, what's the biggest challenge or change in the way we work now that you sort of have a system and have something that feels more sustainable than your first go?
Yeah, the biggest change. I would say for me, documentation has been one of the biggest changes, thinking more in documentation. So kind of what you showed from Dan Wall, pulling iterations in that are in the margins into kind of like the main doc and the main page. That's now just kind of part of my process, making things easier to find, really doing a lot more writing than I used to, capturing a lot of the decisions that we've made along the way of like, why did this change, or why does this work this way, or what doesn't it do? Those things have been a big change for me. The other one, I don't know, but it's shameful to admit as a designer, but I'm terrible at naming my layers, which I know a lot of designers are, but no one wants to admit it. So I've actually gotten really good at naming my layers to match what the developers are calling the things in code, so that when we're talking, we just talk more in variables now, rather than me saying like, it's A and them saying it's B, and then we're saying like, wait, are A and B the same thing? We now just talk in the actual variable names. My layers are named that thing. The component is named that thing. And so it just kind of gets us all on the same page and talking the same language.
Yeah, you make a great point, which is, we often find along the lines of the whole behavior, not assets thing, that like the challenges holding teams back are not about designing and building things well often, right? It's about the very human challenges of communication, or realizing we were both using the right library, but those libraries didn't actually align in the first place. And so that's why we, it still comes back looking different in QA than it did in the comps. So yeah, it's not always something technology needs to solve for us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tommy. Tony also asked a question around QA and how QA teams can be involved in the system. I think that's a really a great call out, Tony, because QA and like copy teams, they often feel like the folks just on the outside looking in, and hey, we're involved too, but it's just always a conversation about design and engineering. I have some thoughts, but Tommy or Susie, anyone have some thoughts around how QA gets involved in all this?
I mean, my main thought is just, this is design systems are made for like happier QA folks. I mean, because it's a way to test it once and have it used in many places. And so I think that the main thing would be to be involved in kind of the review and approval as things get added to a design system, as well as sanity checking the use of those. And to become familiar with the components and the best way to test them out in that way as well. Yeah,
I've seen QA get involved in a number of ways, right? And I think one of the things we do at Knapsack is try and provide that, we talk about it as a central source of truth, not assuming everything is all in sync all the time, or there's one place to always look, but giving someone like a QA analyst the ability to look at how is that thing supposed to look in design? How is it supposed to look and function in code? Does it really work that way when I see it in production? But being able to kind of line up all the pieces, and QA is about the throughput that started with research and IA and UX often. So having that ability to kind of see how things have evolved across design, isolated development, production, I think that's a great spot. They can leverage a system, and then systems provide that opportunity for testing, as Susie pointed out, that hopefully make their jobs easier because there's less individual instances to QA, because we can start to do some kind of top component or pattern level testing. And the one other thing I'd say there is I've seen teams actually develop a new QA capability, and some designers might not like the feel of this at first, but basically a sort of design level system QA, where they're looking at what comes out of design. And in some teams, these folks actually build React and Angular components. They're the folks that are trying to make sure we didn't accidentally create a lot of unnecessary variance. And we've even seen design teams share this responsibility, because it cultivates an appreciation of like, wow, yeah, we didn't really need to make that thing that special way to solve our user experience challenge. And if we did, we would have bloated the system, right? So it actually gives us some different things to assess quality on, which is interesting.
Only thing I'd add to that one is just in not having a QA team and being sort of the QA responsibilities being shared across product design and engineering. Having QA happen as like sort of front end QA happen in a different environment is really great, because you focus on, okay, does everything here check out? And then when you're in the product and throwing a bunch of logic at these components, you're just testing the functionality. Whereas a lot of folks, if you're testing all of that stuff in one environment across browsers, like everything is happening in one spot, you get really overwhelmed. And I notice I start to miss little details where it's like, oh, if I'd have been able to like only like focus on that in a silo, like I could have maybe caught that detail, but I was looking for all these other things. And so it just kind of helps, break the QA process up.
And it's a game of variables too, right? There are fewer variables and known variables in this isolated, sort of a development of a component versus only testing it in context of a larger page or application. It makes it even harder to figure out what you do with the test results. So yeah, it's a great call out as well. We have a couple questions here that are just sort of about the workflows of using Knapsack and how some of even the features work. Cormac, you asked, it's still two different processes to design in Figma and then update values and components in the repo, right? So there are some areas where Knapsack at least can start to offer some syncing. We have a Figma plugin for pulling tokens into code. What we found though is that there's sort of two camps that we've seen in tooling, right? There's teams that are really focused on, can we achieve live synchronicity? So we can all just work where we're working and know that the tokens align, the Figma components update when the React changes. I think that's really exciting, and an area that hopefully we can all take advantage of. I think some of those solutions are hard to rely on for enterprise production products, and sometimes you don't know when there's a disconnect. So we found that with the teams we work with, the most successful approach is to still bring your own design and code, but find ways to solve for more of those human challenges. Make it easier to have one place to look at I see design and view and React don't all look the same, but I also see the statuses and there's some clear notes and we're all looking at one place, right? So while there is definitely work everyone has to do on sort of the important assets that are unique to your business, we can solve for a lot of the human challenges that make it harder to do that. But we also have our aspirations to make all those things easier someday. So it'll be an exciting journey, just for us and just design tooling. I think we're all still pretty early in this space. Even just in terms of how long we've been building these apps, right? It's only been a decade or two in the grand scheme of things. So long way to go for sure. There were also just some questions around, so Chris and Tony both asked around practices around sort of branching. So there, around simultaneous editing within Knapsack, there are, your teams can be in there working on the same branch at the same time, right? I don't want to, there's more that we can do and we'll continue to do to bring that collaboration together. But one of the really exciting parts of the release with branches is that previously in Knapsack, if you were editing, you saw it and you only saw it until you actually created a PR, and then mostly engineers saw it, right? And so now we have this ability to, instead of having things stored locally, shared in a place where others can contribute to it, whether you're working on one big page or all working together to build out different pages within it. So there's a lot of flexibility, and yeah, you can definitely be in there in the same branch. And there's some nuance we didn't get into right here around, what if you don't want to publish it? You want to tee it up for someone else to review. So there's some other great pieces of that workflow as well in there. And it, relates closely to what Tony asked, which is like, what's the best practice for people publishing changes? Do I do it all in one place? Do I do it in a bunch of places? We have a flexible platform, and the behaviors and workflow you put around it matter. There's a lot of different ways to work, right? So you can use multiple branches to tee up different types of work. Maybe you want to make some quick typo fixes while separately you're working on building out a whole new set of components. And that's what this multiple branch sort of feature allows for. I don't know that there's one right way to use it for all teams, but definitely happy to dig in a little bit to kind of your team, your workflows, and share some more thoughts on that in a separate session. Hope that helps a little bit, at least at the broad level. Susie, anything you'd add? I
was just thinking, like, you basically, you don't want a branch to just sit there for a while. So if you want to break it up into the small pieces, and if you want people to collaborate on something before you publish it, you want it to be the right people for the right thing, and then you publish it, and then you move on to the next thing. So it shouldn't really be Susie's branch so much as what it is I'm working on. So that's probably a good edit to my demo. But because then you want to get it going and make it incremental and like finish that button, finish that doc page, get it out there. So that's the nicest way to flow.
Yeah, the last thing a great call. The last thing I'd add is that this is an area where we didn't reinvent a system for contribution and versioning or anything like that. I've been part of product teams that have made custom things for those types of solutions where Git does what it does really well. And so when you run into a question like how does the conflict work, or how might we think about when to create a branch and when not to, there's a lot of perspective out in the world around how Git can work well for teams. And we are able to leverage the strength of those concepts while making it very friendly for folks like me who don't ever spend any time in a Git repo. So that's one of the things we're most excited about around bringing the worlds together here. Awesome. I think that's it for the open questions we had. Again, please, if you have more, we'd love to hear from you. We talk with teams working on and with systems all day, every day, and it's definitely a passion in addition to what we do for a living. So look forward to hearing from all of you, and thanks again for spending your lunch or breakfast or any time of day with us. It'd be great to talk to you. And thanks, Tommy, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.